Coming to paperback and e-readers, from the author of the critically acclaimed book The Man Crisis comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women are becoming lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Pre-order your copy of The Woman Crisis on Amazon.com today. A mob of close to 100 children of the corn came into a WaWa store and ransacked the business, throwing items at each other while others went and stole things. And some jumped on the counter and started twerking, and as this carnage was going on, some of these children of the corn were bold enough to record video of themselves ransacking and ravaging this business. Now, I'm going to show you a clip of this whole carnage before I go further into my commentary. All of this video is used under fair use of U.S. copyright law and is a part of my critical commentary.
I'm walking out of here, bro.
Are y'all making a deal with us? Y'all gonna keep recording?
It's gonna be a little while.
Okay, but like.
Bro, Brooke is out here! Bro, come here! Sit right there!
Now, in the video I've shown you, we see these children allegedly walking into this WaWa store in a mob after there was a fight allegedly at a skating rink. And after they came out of the skating rink, many of these kids, caught up in their emotions about the violence that was participated in the skating rink, decided to go out here and destroy this WaWa store. Now, as they stepped into the store in a mob, these kids basically were shoplifting merchandise. Others were tearing down displays and tearing apart merchandise, throwing it at each other, and a few were jumping up on cars outside in the parking lot, and a handful decided to get up on the counter of the store's front end and decided to start twerking. And as these kids were participating in this just out of control behavior, some of them thought that because there was nobody there to stop them, they decided to have the audacity to record themselves and record all the carnage they were participating in. Now, the police in Philadelphia see this as an isolated incident, but when I take a critical examination of the behavior of these children, it fits the pattern and profile for the behavior I called in my classic video, Children of the Corn. Now, back in 2015, I made a classic video called Negro Children of the Corn. And in that video, I talked about the horrors that transpired that led to parts of Baltimore being torn apart in riots after the murder of Freddie Gray. And in the aftermath of the murder of Freddie Gray, many young children took to the streets and went out here looting and ransacking all of Baltimore in their anger at the death of Freddie Gray. Now, fast forward 7 years later, and we've had numerous incidents all across this country, and recently we had a 7-Eleven basically ransacked in the same way that this WaWa store was ransacked here in Philadelphia. And while your police in places like Los Angeles and Philadelphia believe these are isolated incidents, they fit a pattern and profile for behavior that I have talked about regarding your beta males and your females who come from single parent households, because the seeds for all of this chaos start in the single parent home where the mother is heading the family. And because the mother is heading the family and there is no father to provide authority and discipline, this puts the seed in the ground that makes children grow up like wild stalks. And as these children grow up in a home with a single mother, usually what happens is, because these children are not taught to respect any sort of authority figure, because the mother puts them in daycare and is not there to bond with the children and nurture the children, what happens is that the children grow up not being nurtured to bear fruit and become productive citizens. What they grow up to become is thorns and briars. And these thorns and briars, because they grow up wild without any sort of discipline or structure, what happens is they grow up to become wild stalks, and these wild stalks basically destroy anything in their path. And a clear example of this is shown to us in the video that is presented in the WaWa store, and ironically, the video recorded by the children inside of the store. And like the characters in the Stephen King horror movie Children of the Corn, these children basically just, again, tear up anything in their path, because they have, again, not been taught to respect authority figures. They have not been taught discipline and structure, and they have poor impulse control, and they just have no self-control. Because the reason why they say that this WaWa store was ransacked was because these kids had seen a fight inside of a skating rink, and as they saw the fight in the skating rink, 100 of them went to the WaWa store, caught up in their feelings regarding what transpired at the skating rink, and then decided to wild out inside of the WaWa store, participating in delinquent behavior. Now, that delinquent behavior varied from shoplifting in the store and taking merchandise to someone basically tearing up displays of merchandise in the store, to others going out here and knocking down displays, and some going in there and jumping on the counter and twerking, and a possible attempt at an assault of an employee, to people in the parking lot jumping on cars. The behavior of these children was basically wild and out of control, and it was wild and out of control basically, again, due to the dysfunctional way they had not been raised. And I say not been raised because if these children had been raised by a mother, their mother would have taught them basic things like knowing how to respect authority, because the mother would have been an authority figure in the child's life, so they would have known to respect the authority of adults. And two, they would have respected other people's property, because they would have learned to respect their mother's property. But when children are not raised by parents, you see this wild and wanton behavior like you see in the video, and that is due to 60 years of feminism telling us that motherhood is not important, and telling women that they can give their children to child care providers, and the child care providers can do an equal job of a mother. Well, from this video, we clearly see that child care providers cannot really provide care for a child, because a child needs to go out here and learn basic things about authority, and they also need to learn to respect other people's property, and they need to bond with their mothers. Because one of the reasons why these children can just go out here and participate in wanton violence is because they've learned to become indifferent, and they've learned to become indifferent because there was nobody there to give them care that met their emotional needs, and because there was no one there to meet their emotional needs. Many of these children are apathetic, many of these children are cold, and many of them are disconnected from other people and detached from other people. And because they're detached from other people, they don't care about anybody else's property. They don't care about anybody's boundaries. They don't care about anybody's property, and they don't care about anybody's safety. And that is all due to the dysfunctional way all of these children have been raised in America's dysfunctional society. And we have the third generation of these children of the corn, and this third generation of children of the corn is what I'm seeing to be one of the most dangerous groups of children, because in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing that these children really are not getting that family base or that family structure that they need. And because they don't have that family base or that family structure to provide them a sense of authority or a sense of order, they just go out here and participate in this type of what I call mob behavior. And when they get into this mob behavior, they go out here and just participate in all sorts of just wanton behavior. Because as I went down my video list of videos I did about children of the corn, I'm seeing a pattern of this behavior. About in 2019, there was an incident where we had kids just converging in Chicago and going downtown and terrorizing downtown Chicago. And this behavior, again, fits a pattern of behavior. And the reason why these children are participating in this behavior is because adults are not teaching them, adults are not preparing them, adults are not leading these children. And because these children have absolutely no direction, again, they're growing up like wild stalks. They're participating in impulsive behavior, and because they feel like doing things, they go out here and wreak havoc in places like downtown Chicago in 2019, in places like that 7-Eleven just a couple of months ago, and in this WaWa store just last week. And sadly, many of our politicians and big business, they can't really put together a pattern for this behavior. And many of our politicians, they are just so detached and disconnected as related to these issues. And I believe that they just don't want to deal with them because they don't want to deal with America's women, and because they don't want to deal with America's women and hold them accountable for the way they created the policies that created these children of the corn. They don't want to say to the America's women that 60 years ago, you told us that these approaches that you had just don't work. And again, we have been raising children in this dysfunctional way for over 60 years. And instead of us bearing the fruit of productive adults, what we're going out here and doing is producing thorns and briars, and these thorns and briars are basically tearing up the country. And instead of going out here and working towards making things better, many on the left want to do is give these children passes and enable their behavior like they've done for the last 7 years. Because for the last 7 years, your leftists have gone out here and enabled this behavior with policies like bail reform and policies like making it where these children are not punished for crimes like shoplifting. And what these politicians are doing is, again, enabling this behavior, encouraging the children of the corn to participate in more wanton violence. But what these children need is somebody to set order, and they need somebody to set boundaries and correct their behavior. Unfortunately, because we have your females who don't want to be held accountable for the way they raise children, politicians who don't want to be held accountable for the policies that they created that enable this behavior, there's not much going to change as related to these children of the corn who desperately need a authority like a man to go out here and set order and go out here and set boundaries for these children and let them know where the line is. Because the reason why we have all of these children of the corn wreaking havoc all across the country is because we wound up taking fathers out of the home in the 1960s with policies like no-fault divorce, the establishment of the welfare state, and the creation of the single-parent home. And those who were in power back then thought a woman could do the job of a man and raise a child on her own. But we're seeing over the last 60 years, this is not the case, because God did not make a man and a woman to be by themselves. And he did not make the helpmeet to go out here and be the head. And because he did not make the helpmeet to be the head, this is why we're seeing all of this chaos, because God made the man to be the head. God made the man to be the steward over the family. And when the man is over the family and the head and he sets order, he establishes structure, and he makes it where the children have to submit to his authority, and they have to behave in a responsible way. Because when a man goes out here and does these things, he is going out here and making sure his children are presenting an image that reflects a positive example of himself, because he wants to show that he is a man who is following God, and he also wants to show that his house is in order. Because one of the things that we see with children of the corn, it is a reflection that America's house isn't in order, because when America's children are running wild and out of control, that shows that America's society is deteriorating. And it's deteriorating because we have a whole host of weak men who refuse to go out here and set order. Many of these males have abdicated their role as related to God, and this is why we have these children of the corn. And these children of the corn, again, are a reflection of a society of weak men who refuse to go out here and stand up and be men and go out here and establish themselves as authority figures who are being accountable to Jesus and God, and men who are going to go out here and establish a family where these children are a reflection of themselves. Because when your children are wild and out of control like this, it basically says that the family is weak, and it says that the men are weak because their children are completely out of control. Now, when I was in junior high school back in the 80s, there was a lot of kids at the junior high school I went to, IS 148, who used to act like this, but the problem was because nobody really wanted to set order at that time. And again, this is a problem I've seen since the 80s, and it all comes down to the men not setting order and the females being overwhelmed and out of control. Because when I heard that there were children as young as 10 years old in this mob, it truly troubled me, because it showed me how much worse things got since 1985 when I started junior high school. And if you've got 10-year-olds running wild like this, it just shows how there's a just complete collapse of the American family, and how there's nobody raising this children. I look at this case, and I look at the case of the supposed 12 or 15-year-old boy who destroyed his mother's apartment. And if this is the case with our children, our society is in some serious trouble. And I say our society is in serious trouble because when I look at each of these incidents, they're not isolated. They're showing me a pattern and profile of behavior that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And it's looking like the behavior is getting much worse and not getting better. And again, the main reason why things are getting worse is because we have females who wanted to be the head of the family, not wanting to take responsibility for their failure to raise children on their own, one. Two, you have males in political positions who don't want to admit that their policies are failures. And three, we have law enforcement, which is abdicating its responsibility to establishing order inside of a society, because many of these leftist prosecutors, they refuse to punish these children, to let them know where the boundary is, and others want to create policies where they enable behavior in these children by doing things like not giving them any sort of bail or any sort of serious sentence, not understanding that children need to know where the line is as related to their behavior, and they need to be held accountable when they go out here and participate in out of control behavior, because the only way you get order is by going out here and setting a boundary, and then after you set the boundary, punish individuals for being out of control. Now, the police say that they're looking for many of these children, but I doubt they're going to be able to do anything, because many of these kids, there were just so many of them. And again, the prosecutors there don't want to set a boundary, and that's another serious problem, because what encourages more of these children of the corn to participate in their wanton violence is adults not establishing themselves as authority figures, and adults not going out here and setting the order that these children need in order to grow up to become responsible adults. Because in order for a child to become a responsible adult, they need to see that adults are going to set boundaries for them, set order for them, and insist that they follow the rules and standards of a society. These are things that young children need to see, but sadly, many children don't see it, because we go out here and, again, enable bad behavior. And that's what we saw at the WaWa in Philadelphia. We saw just what happens when you put these seeds in the ground, and when you put these seeds in the ground, you don't go out here and nurture that plant grows up like a weed or a wild stalk. And what that wild stalk does is it chokes out your productivity, and it eventually chokes out your society, because that's what thorns and briars do. They do harm to any sort of land, and that's what's happening now with all of these children of the corn. And again, you have police and prosecutors scratching their head, but the answer is staring them in the face, and that is, you have to, again, teach discipline and structure in order to get good children. And we have not established a foundation for teaching children to be good over the last 60 years, and that's why we've got children of the corn terrorizing and destroying our society. Now, if you want to learn more about how children become children of the corn, you can pre-order my book, The Woman Crisis, on Amazon.com by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to learn why so many males go out here and participate in this delinquent behavior, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format, and you can find both of these books on online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.